Hello and welcome. My name is Matthew Greer. Today I'm going to be giving a presentation on the cranial nerves. This is prepared for my Bio 515 class through Grand Canyon University. My professor is Dr. John Tassone, and today's date. And let's jump right in. The cranial nerves are super important. What are the cranial nerves? Well, there are 12 pairs of nerves arising from the brainstem, with one big exception, and this is the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is very, very important to the parasympathetic nervous system. It's kind of the head of that kind of pathway. The cranial nerves have both motor and sensory function, meaning they control both skeletal and visceral and smooth motion, as well as they help with your senses, such as taste and sight and hearing. They help maintain equilibrium. Your facial expressions, the expressions that I have now, are from my cranial muscles. They help with eye movement. They're labeled 1 through 12, and 1 is in the front. And then moving all the way to the back is 12. So they're from anterior to posterior. And they're pairs because they're on the right and left hand side of the brain. You got 2 eyes, you need two sets of nerves for them. So the first nerve, we're going to start at number 1, and we're going to work our way towards 12. The first nerve is the olfactory nerve, and it is a nerve that has sensory fibers, and it is responsible for the sensation of smell. Olfactory is located up here in the frontal lobe, along with memory. So this is why smells can bring back certain memories or places that you associate with them. They're very closely together. The olfactory bulbs in humans are much smaller than other mammals, so we have a very reduced sense of smell than our other companions in the mammal phylum, such as dogs and cats, and all of those have a much higher olfactory capability. All right, we're going to lump cranial nerves 2, 3, 4, and 6 together. This is optic, ocular motor, trochlear, and abducens. They are all involved in the function for the eyeball. Cranial nerve 2, this big one coming out the back of the eye here, is the optic nerve. It is a sensory function, and its function is vision, actually seeing images. Both 3, 4, and 6 are all mixed fibers. They all have a kind of shared ability to influence eyeball movement, and proprioception, which is kind of a sixth sense. It's our sense of where we are in space and where we physically are in our environment. Cranial nerve 3 also has this cool ability for pupil constriction in the presence of bright light, getting your pupil small as to not damage your eyeball. A very cool ability of your body to kind of self-regulate and keep this homeostasis going on. Make sure you're not damaging your eyes. So there's a lot of nerves coming out the back of this eyeball. It's a very complex nervous structure. It's a very important job. A lot of our senses is being able to see. And that proprioception plays into our balance and just how when we move through things that we're not bumping into things and tripping over things all the time. Cranial nerve 5, this is the one kind of that we tucked in the middle there that we skipped in the last one. This is our trigeminal nerve. It is a mixed, once again, it has some sensory, some somatic, what things feel like inside of the mouth and on your face. It has a chewing function where it helps you masticate. So it has both the maxillary and the mandibular branch of these. There's 3 branches. The ophthalmic, which is going up towards your eye. The face, and then the maxillary and mandibular, which are going to help go down and innervate your mouth and kind of help with that chewing process and get that skeletal muscle moving, as well as give you feeling inside of your mouth. Feel textures and stuff like that. Cranial nerve 7 is the facial nerve, and it has 5 branches. It's mixed fibers, so it's going to do both sensory and motor again. It's responsible for facial expression, secretion of saliva and tears, and it gives you taste on the front of your mouth. There's another cranial nerve that gives you taste on the back of your tongue, but this one is responsible for the front of the tongue. And the 5 branches are the temporal branch going up towards the temporal area, the zygomatic on the cheekbone, the buccal on the cheek, the marginal mandibular down here, and the cervical which is coming down here. Allows you to make that kind of distasteful face. Cranial nerve 8 is our vestibulocochlear, or auditory nerve. It is a sensory nerve responsible for hearing, and it also helps with our sense of equilibrium. This is why if you get an ear infection, you might get dizzy or have some vertigo as you're going around, because this sense from the ear to the pons, this kind of sensory relay of the brain, is kind of disrupted, so you're not getting the best signal from there. Cranial nerve 9 is the Glossopharyngeal. It is a mixed fiber again. It is responsible in part for swallowing, so more secretion of saliva. This is the one that gives you taste on the back half of your tongue. And it is also responsible for a little bit of monitoring of your blood pressure and making sure that that's at a homeostatic level. Cranial nerve 10, this is kind of the exception one that we talked about that's not coming off of that main area. This is a mixed fiber, so it has both sensory and motor components. It is the efferent output, so making things happen for skeletal muscles, smooth muscles, and some of the heart. And it is the afferent input from your thoracic and abdominal organs. So when you have like a stomach ache or you have like that feeling of fullness, that's coming from your vagus nerve. Your vagus nerve also monitors your blood pressure, and if you work really hard and calm down and take longer breaths, you kind of have a tiny bit of voluntary action on your blood pressure and your heart rate. But your body is really good at maintaining living conditions, that homeostasis, so it can override you. Say you hold your breath for too long, eventually your body's going to pass out from not getting enough oxygen, and that vagus nerve will take over and help you breathe and help you do all the things that you need to stay alive. Cranial nerve 11 is our accessory nerve. It's located here in the back, this kind of bluer one. And it is a motor fiber. It is the efferent output for skeletal muscles of the throat, voice box, neck, and shoulder. So it is the one that gives you the physical ability to move around, to talk. It gives you some shoulder ability, some neck. Kind of allows you to do all this thing. And it makes sense that this would be where this is located, because we're getting ready to move through that foramen magnum down into the spine. And so to have this located more towards the back makes sense. You'd want your oculomotor and your optic and your olfactory towards the front, because that's where that part of your senses is coming from. It's from the front part there. But these ones in the back, they're more worried about things that are towards the back. So things like the voice box and the throat and the neck and shoulder. Our last cranial nerve 12, is the hypoglossal. It kind of exits out of the skull here and comes down. This is allowing for tongue movement. I am relying on my hypoglossal right now to give you this information. It is mostly motor fiber. That is its kind of job, is to provide that kind of ability for your tongue to move around. Language is not kept here. It's kept more in the Wernicke's and Broca's areas, towards the more front of the brain and middle of the brain. But this is where we get the innervation for our actual tongue movement. So it's this kind of combination of all of these afferent, efferent pathways up in the brain. Now, remembering these is not always the easiest thing. So we like to, especially in anatomy, we like to use mnemonics. They are kind of this nice way where you might remember yours for the solar system when you were little. My very eager mother just bought 9, and if you were before 2003, pizzas, because Pluto was still a planet back then. But for this one, to remember the names, you can use on old Olympus towering top, a Finn and German viewed some hops, and these match the olfactory, optic, ocular motor, trochlear, trigeminal, abducens, facial. Vestibulocochlear is a little weird here because we're going with the A for auditory instead of vestibulocochlear, but the rest is the same. Hypoglossal, vagus, accessory, also can be called spinal. So that's another one, special one there, and hypoglossal. And then mnemonic for both sensory, motor, or if they're both. So if it's sensory, it's S. If it's motor, it's M. And if it's both, it's B. It would be some say marry money, but my brother says big brains matter more. So it's kind of a nice way to remember. If you've got them all lined up, CN 1 through 12, and you use these mnemonics, you can figure out both what the first letter of it starts with and what it's going to be. If it's sensory, motor, or both. So it kind of gives you this nice little easy kind of cheat sheet that you can use in your brain to kind of help you organize this information, because it's a lot. It's a lot of information. If you want to go more into detail about looking into and researching some of this, Johnson has a great overview of what the 12 nerves are. The mnemonic is from Gayard. There is some a little bit more adult versions of some mnemonics on there. So there's some dirtier mnemonics. If your brain works better there, you can go grab some of those. And then, of course, from the textbook, Sherwood, lots of good information there about the entire central nervous system. I hope you learned something, and thank you for watching.